A slightly odd thing that publishers do from time to time is run an event called a book launch. I say odd because book launches seem to be designed largely to achieve the goal of telling the author's good friends and family about the new book and getting them to buy a copy. But it seems to me that telling an author's friends and family about the book and getting them to buy it is really picking some pretty low-hanging fruit. I mean, if your good friends and family don't know about the book already and aren't going to buy it, well, it's going to be a bit of a marketing challenge to convince the rest of the world. So what we've decided to do instead, to mark the publication of this book, The Good Sporting Life, is to provide something we hope is more interesting and encouraging to a much broader group of people. Stephen Liggins is the author of this terrific little book about sport and Christian faith, and he's going to introduce you to two elite sports people and talk to them about how their Christian faith and their sport intersected during their very successful sporting careers. As well as that, those two sports people have read Stephen's book, and they're going to fire some questions back at Stephen too. Now, in our part of the world, sport is just beginning to start up again after a couple of months off due to the pandemic. So it seems to me that this is a good time, as we start to resume our sporting interests, to pause and think about how our Christian lives are impacted by our sport and how our sport is impacted by our Christian lives. If you'd like to get hold of the book, please head to the Matthias Media website or the website of your favourite Christian bookstore. But enough from me. Let's join Stephen Liggins as he talks to Dave Simmons and Susie Harris.
Hi, welcome to the Good Sporting Life interviews. My name is Stephan Liggins and it's great to have you with us. As some of you may know, I recently had a book on the topic of Christianity and sport published. It's entitled The Good Sporting Life. Now, instead of the traditional book launch, we thought it might be more interesting if I spoke with some of the Christian sports people I interviewed in preparing the book. So I'm pleased to have with us Susie Harris and David Simmons. Susie Harris was first picked for the Australian women's hockey team, the Hockeyroos, at the tender age of 17 for the 2002 Women's World Cup in Perth. She went on to represent her country on over 50 occasions. And these days she's married with 2 children and lives in the Blue Mountains just outside of Sydney. David Simmons played 200 games in the National Rugby League, scoring over 100 tries. He spent the first half of his career with the Sharks and the second half with the Panthers. And these days he's married with 4 children and lives at the base of the Blue Mountains. Now, I'm going to speak with both Susie and David about their Christian faith, about their sport, and how the two interact together. They in turn are going to ask me about some of the topics discussed in my book. Now, as I said, my name's Stephen Liggins. I'm one of the ministers at Anglican Church of Springwood, where this is being filmed, and I'm also a guest lecturer at the Sydney Missionary and Bible College. And furthermore, I love sport. I love playing sport, I love watching sport, I love reading about sport. And when I was much younger, I almost became a professional cricketer. Almost. These days I jog fairly poorly and am involved with masters athletics, specifically the throwing events, and compete with a modest level of success. Well, could I welcome our first guest, David Simmons, the former Panthers and Sharks player. David, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me here, Steve. Great to be here.
Yeah. Now, as any sports person knows, it's really important to have a good warm-up. So I thought I'd ask you some warm-up questions just to get the juices flowing, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Which football team do you currently support?
The Panthers.
Now, which team did you support growing up?
The Sharks, because I lived in the Shire. Grew up there.
Fair enough. Now, besides rugby league, which obviously you enjoy, what other sports do you enjoy?
I really like the NFL. I find that a good sport to watch.
Do you have a team in the NFL you like?
Not really. I just follow the players. I like Tom Brady
at
the moment.
Now, if you could go and watch any sporting event in the world, what would you like to go and watch?
It would be the Super Bowl, the main event.
The big one?
Yeah, the big one. Yeah.
Okay. Coming closer to home, you live fairly locally at the base of the Blue Mountains. Tell us a bit about your family.
Yeah, so married to Sammy. We're married, it'll be 15 years this year, which is great. 4 kids, Andy, Caleb, Xavier, Zoe. They're all in primary school. Well, my eldest in high school now. So that kind of primary school age at the moment.
Excellent. So they would have been doing schooling at home recently, I imagine.
Yeah, it's been a bit chaotic, but we got through it. They're back at school now, which is great. And I forgot, we've also got a dog. So
excellent.
Part of the family.
Yeah, good. And when your family wants to go on holidays, do you have a favourite holiday destination?
We've just started camping. So we love camping, and you can do that anywhere. So we've really got into the beach camping holiday lately.
Very nice. Well, what I'd like to do now is to perhaps focus a bit more specifically on your football and on your faith. But by way of background, can you tell us a bit about the family you grew up in and what role sport had in your upbringing?
Yeah, so I had a really good family growing up, mother and father, elder sister, younger brother. And the role that sport played in that was, I just loved sport as a kid. Earliest memories of sport were watching the State of Origin with my dad on the telly. I used to love watching, Laurie Daly, E.T., those kind of guys. And then I'd go into the backyard and I would be those people. And so they were my earliest memories. And just loved playing sport, played soccer, played cricket. Didn't play footy till I was a bit older, but just loved all kinds of sport.
Yeah. Now, I think it was pretty similar with me. All of us wanted to make it in sport. But when did you realise that playing professional rugby league was a genuine career possibility? How did that come about?
Yeah. What's funny, I was never really thinking about a career in sport. For me, it was just always just loved to play. Really enjoyed it. Had some success, so, that helps you to keep going. But for me, the first point I realised I could play professionally was just before I was playing professionally. Right. So it was the end of high school. I was focused on the HSC, but also playing schoolboys rugby league. Played New South Wales schoolboys. Just missed out on Australian schoolboys tour to England. I was a bit devastated, but went back and played for the Sharks second grade team, and started to do quite well there. And it was only the next year that I started playing first grade. So before I was really thinking about a career in sport, it was starting to take off. And then that's when I thought, I wouldn't mind doing this for a living.
Okay. So what do you remember about the first time you ran onto the field with the Sharks for a first grade game? What do you remember about that game?
So 2003, it was late in the season. I was on the bench. I got put on with about 7 minutes to go. We were losing. I got the ball. I threw a flick pass. I never throw flick passes. Threw one. It stuck. We scored. I was pretty rapt. Ended up losing the game. I think I missed a tackle. Doesn't matter. And anyway, went to the sheds. Got my first blast from a coach. The whole team got blasted. And that was my debut. So real, kind of baptism by fire.
Great to be alive. Blasted by the coach.
It was great, yeah.
Yeah. So that was 2003 when you played your first grade game. Now, you played, I believe, 200 first grade games.
Yes.
And scored over 100 tries.
Yep, just over.
Just over 100 tries, including 4 in one game.
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
Now, your career spanned about 13 seasons, I think.
Yep, 13 seasons.
What did you get when you retired from the game?
Well,
this.
They give you I'll hold it there. They give you a boot when you retire. Like this is the boot I wore in my last season.
They give you the boot out, so to speak.
Yeah. They give you the boot, literally.
Yeah.
It's my left boot because I'm a lefty. They bronze it for you. They put a little plaque here with your games and your tries, and they give that to you as a bit of a memento. It's a little bit dusty because it's been my doorstop at home, actually.
Yeah.
So it's a nice little memento.
It's very tasteful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
Lovely. Well, let me put it back there where we can see your name.
There you go.
Well, that was no doubt that was a highlight for you, but thinking of a career which stretched over 13 seasons, I know you played, I think, for the City in the City Country game once.
Yep.
What do you rank as some of the real highlights or thrills of your rugby league career?
Well, I guess the greatest thrill you can have is to play finals and win games in the finals. I didn't have a lot of that. Was never in those teams that were really pushing for a premiership. Didn't have many personal kind of achievements either in terms of representative stuff. So
you played for the City.
City was good.
City Country.
That was great.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing that I've loved the most was winning games is great. Singing the team song, nothing beats that kind of thing. As a personal achievement though. Do
you want to sing the team song? No, don't worry. That's fine.
I might have forgotten it now.
You've forgotten it, yeah.
We only sang it about 50% of the time, sadly.
Yes.
So, but 2013, I was the league's leading try scorer That was
Wow.
That was a great achievement because it was just everything worked that year, and that was a lot of fun when you're playing sport. So that was an achievement. So that was a real highlight that season. And also, you mentioned I got to score 4 tries in a game. That was also the game I went past 100 tries.
Yeah.
It was my wife's birthday.
Oh,
and so it
it's
was
all
just
there.
kind of that was all happening then as well. So in terms of a season working,
What a birthday gift to give to your wife.
Anna lovely.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Oh, that's great. What are some of the one or two of the great players you played with or against?
So I got to play against, play with first of all. Got to play with Brett Camorley. Halfbacks, they're the core of the team. Brett Camorley was terrific. Such a small fellow, but the toughest you could play with. I also got to play against Andrew Johns.
Yes.
I remember there was a season, my second season, I was very proud. I hadn't dropped a bomb yet. I was playing fullback and I'd caught something like 20 from 20 bombs. I had this stat going. And I went to play Andrew Johns down at Newcastle and he put up pearlers all night, ended up dropping 2 of them. Yeah. And so that was, as much as it was a disappointment for me, getting to play against him was great. One of the best.
Yeah, real thrill. Now, I believe you became a Christian, you came to faith prior to your rugby league career taking off. How did you become a Christian and a follower of Jesus?
Yeah, so I grew up in my home. We weren't against Christianity, but we weren't really heavily for it either. We'd go to church, mainly when it was suited us, and I heard about God that way. But it wasn't until very late in high school when I started going to youth group, mainly for a girl. I don't know, this happens sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know anyone else who's ever done that.
I was going for the girl and also hearing about Jesus, though, hearing the gospel and the story of Jesus and what he did on the cross for us and his resurrection was just so compelling. And reading the scriptures just made me go, I've got to follow this guy. I have to. And that began my Christian life. That was my conversion. And just grew from there. And that was thankfully just before I started playing professional sports and things like that. So it was good timing.
Yeah, so your rugby league would have been developing as I guess your Christian faith was growing. Now, rugby league is a pretty intense sort of environment.
Yeah.
How did your Christian faith go there? What were some of the opportunities it gave you for your Christian faith, and what were some of the challenges?
Yeah, well, I think the opportunities are... I saw it initially as just a platform to be publicly Christian and let people know about God that way. And that was kind of all I really thought about when I started playing. I since realised, God used sport and those times to really shape me as a person, as a believer. So there's great opportunities there for that and to share your faith with other players, which we can talk about a little bit later. But the challenges, I think, I realised the challenges much more when I left the game. Because when you're in amongst it, you can't really see them so well. It just feels normal. But see, what happened for me was I left rugby league to go to study at theological college.
You've been to Bible college?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that contrast was so huge that in college with all these, sort of lovely, encouraging Christian people all around you all the time, made me realise that the sporting environment can be quite challenging and hard for the Christian. But it wasn't really until I left it that I could see some of those challenges much more clearly. And I think it was just, God's grace that he kept me, on the straight and narrow path through those challenges.
That's wonderful. Now, any sporting career has its ups and downs, its highs and lows. Did your Christian faith help you navigate that at all?
Oh, absolutely. It was like a rock through those times. Not always, because beginning when I started my career, I was riding the wave of wins and losses and good performances, bad performances. If I won, I felt good. If I lost, I felt bad. I was tied to my performance. But over time, I realised, I guess what you call a contentment in Christ. So something Paul talks about in Philippians, something that athletes love to take out of context a lot is, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. But Paul's talking about being content, And so just before that, he talks about how he can be content in when he has need, but also when he has plenty. I think that's really interesting. And it just taught me to be content with wins as well as losses. To be content that I had Jesus as a saviour and a Lord. And he was working through all those things for my good. So I think learning contentment was really how you get to deal with those highs and lows through sport.
Okay. Now, I imagine you would have been going to church throughout this time, but were there any people in the footballing world who encouraged you in your faith?
Yeah, so initially, and he's in your book actually, Jason Stevens. He was a terrific support to me. He was a Christian at the time I entered the Sharks, and I describe him as like a guardian angel, because I came in as a young Christian a bit worried about what people would think about me, but he had just come out at the time saying he was going to be celibate until, he got married. And so all the attention went on to him. I could sit in the corner and just watch and learn. So he was a terrific Christian role model to have at that time. And then across the course of my career, other Christian players, but also the chaplains in the teams were fantastic supports.
You'll go.
I get to ask you some questions.
You can ask me some questions now, yes.
This is great. The tables have turned. Now, you mentioned at the start that you've played some sport, almost professional as well. Can you tell us what are some of the sports that you've played over the course of your life?
Okay. When I was younger, I grew up playing cricket and soccer. I got reasonably good at cricket, such that when I finished high school, it looked like that a professional career was a possibility. I went for it for a few years, but like quite a few people, I almost got there, but not quite. But over the years, I played a lot of soccer. I played some rugby league, done a lot of athletics, but I pretty much, probably like yourself, turned my hand to pretty well anything, tennis, golf, volleyball, baseball, etc., etc. And as I said, these days I jog poorly and do a bit of shot put and discus and javelin.
Yep. Like all of us, just a lover of all sports.
Yeah.
Now, you're a minister, you're a lecturer, a Christian minister. Why did you want to write about Christianity in sport? What made you want to write this book?
Yeah, well, look, sport has been a big part of my life, and it's a big part of many people's lives around the world. And as a Christian, I wanted to think about how my Christian faith impacted my sporting life. I've noticed over the years that some people who are Christians, it's like their Christian life is here and their sport is over here. I was speaking to an older Christian gentleman a while back, and he said that when he was young, he lived his Christian life, but sport was like something he did with his time off, away from the business of being a Christian. But really, sport, if we play it, should be part of our Christian life. It should fit together. So I guess what I wanted to do was to think about sport Christianly and how sport can be part of our Christian life, so that it can be a plus, not a minus for our faith, a plus, not a minus for the kingdom of God.
Now, obviously, you've written a book. You want Christians to know something about sport. What is it that, I guess if you could put it in a nutshell, what do you really want Christians to know about sport?
Yeah. I think I'd like Christians to realise that sport is a really good gift from God. It's something which is given to us to enjoy. It's good in itself. I mean, playing sport is fun. It can be thrilling. It can be exciting. A chilly afternoon, green grass, you're playing soccer, you're playing football. It's wonderful. But there are also lots of really good things that can be achieved through sport. It can be good for your health. It can be great for relationships. Good for Christian witness, good for Christian encouragement, etc., etc. So there's an awful lot going for it, which I think we need to thank God for and appreciate and take advantage of. But like all areas of life, it has its dangers. And I think the two chief dangers with sport are idolatry and immorality. Idolatry is where you take a good thing, like sport, and turn it into a God thing. You don't keep it in its correct place. But also immorality, like all areas of life, there can be bad behaviour associated with sport. On the field, cheating, bad play. Off the field, sexual immorality, drink, drugs, etc. So I guess what I want Christians to do is to appreciate the good stuff, but also be aware of and to avoid the bad stuff.
That is good to know. Now, you mentioned Christian witness there.
Yeah.
That's something I'm very interested in. I tried to share my faith when I was playing. I just wonder, and you've got a chapter on it too, about the sport as a mission field.
Yeah.
How did you go with outreach in sports? How do you still go with your outreach in sports?
Look, okay could be better.
Sure.
One of the great things about sport is you see people week after week, but you don't work with them. They're not at the desk next to you 24 hours, 24/7.
Yeah.
And so you see them regularly. You strive together. You suffer together. It creates a bit of a bond. And so you have this great relationship. And I liked all the people I played sport with. They were friends of mine. And because they were friends of mine, I wanted good stuff to happen to them. And the best thing which can happen to anyone is to hear about Jesus, to become a follower of him. So I often would pray for my cricketing friends. I'd drive to a game, pray that God would give me opportunities. Sometimes I'd get there and forget all about it and miss every opportunity. Sometimes I'd have some good chats with people. Two things I did notice, though, David, was that one year I was playing at a particular cricket club. Now, when I played for them in the past, I was, to my knowledge, the only Christian amongst about 60 players. But one year we had this guy from England join the club, who was also a Christian. Suddenly there were two of us. He was 19, I was 30. I was from Australia, he was from England. He came to my church, we went to church together, and the combined impact of us was really quite remarkable, such that people, I think, were a bit more interested in Christianity, and we, near the end of the season, ran a 4 or 5 week Christianity Explained course, and some of the guys from the club came along to that.
Wow.
The other thing I've noticed is that witness doesn't just last while you're playing sport. I'm still in contact with some of my old cricketing friends, and I've noticed that a few of them seem to be a bit more open about talking, I guess, about their faith and thinking about life more deeply, or deeply in this way, than when we were playing. And so one of the great things about sport is it can be lifelong friendships which we can continue to take advantage of. Now, Dave, just before we let you go here, just a few other quick thoughts. What do you do now, and what role does sport play in your life these days?
So what I'm doing now, I work as a minister at Emu Plains Anglican Church. I'm also, I don't get paid for this, but I'm also the chaplain at the Panthers.
Okay, that's the club you used to play for.
Yeah, it's a great role. I love being able to give back to a great club and serve them. And so sport for me, I'm involved in that way. But I still love to watch, I still love to watch NRL, I still watch NFL. And now my kids are playing, so they're teaching me a few lessons, now, because you lose your skills pretty quick after you stop playing, sadly. So my kids are starting to play a lot of sport with me, and I'm remembering how quickly you lose your skills.
Oh, it's a shame, isn't it?
It's a shame.
Well, we're in COVID-19 restrictions at the moment, but the rugby league season should be starting again soon. What are you looking forward to this season?
I'm looking forward to the Panthers killing it, as we always expect them to.
Every season.
And just enjoying that. Like me as a kid watching with my dad, I love watching with my family. It's good times together.
Well, David, thank you for spending some time with us.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, from men's rugby league to women's hockey, would you welcome our next guest, Susie Harris? Susie, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Stephen.
Yeah. Now, as we did with David, I think we need to go for a bit of a warm-up routine.
Okay.
So I've got some rapid-fire questions for you. If you're ready?
Yep, ready when you are.
What was the name of your first ever hockey team?
The Blaxland Rovers.
Okay. The Blaxland Rovers. Do you remember playing your first game for them? What happened?
Well, it would have been about 5, but I don't remember what happened, but I remember it was out on grass, the old grass fields out at Kingswood, and I think I remember parents cheering on the sideline and the maybe red frogs from the canteen afterwards.
Lovely. Now, hockey is, of course, your big sport. It's a winter sport. Yep. What did you play in summer growing up?
Oh, look, anything and everything. I loved all sports with my family. I think I did some little A's in the summer seasons, bit of tennis, swimming with family, just anything. But, yeah, mostly hockey. It wasn't long before that could become summer and winter.
Yeah. Now, what's the most exciting sporting event you've ever watched?
Look, I'd have to say Sydney 2000 Olympics. A few of those events, but particularly I was a ball girl during the Sydney 2000 Olympics at the
You
hockey.
were a ball girl?
So I watched the gold medal match that the Australian women's hockey
So
won.
if we got the footage of that, we could find you there.
Yes,
That's exciting.
it is. So that was a wonderful gold medal match to watch. Yeah.
Now, you're a hockey player. Who's perhaps the best hockey player you've played with or against?
Ooh, probably Luciana Aymar was a Argentinian player who was sort of World International Player of the Year about 8 times, countless gold medals, and just a really fantastic, skillful midfielder, exciting player. And I played against her for quite a few times in World Cups and Champions Trophies and things like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Your family? Tell us about the family you're part of now.
Okay, well, I'm married to Daniel and I have 2 girls with him, Evelyn and Joy. So they're 4 and about 9 months old. So that's me, but I'm also one of 5 girls who grew up playing hockey with my parents and,
Great. And when your family goes on holidays these days,
Yes.
do you have a favourite holiday destination?
Oh, well, international. I love to think of international ones, but we love going camping, like I think David said as well. So we're into that at the moment. We love going down to Jindabyne, camping by the lake, or going to the beach as well with family, and we have a real variety. We love Lake Wanaka in New Zealand. It's a real favourite as well. We've been there a few times, so yeah.
Okay. Now that you're warm, you've warmed up, I'm moving on to hockey.
Yes.
I've seen some footage of you making your debut for Australia. I think it was against England in 2002 in Perth.
Yes.
And then commentators referring to you as Susie Harris, the 17-year-old. She had to get permission to get out of school to play the game.
Yes,
now,
essentially.
The women's hockey roos in Australia at the time were an absolute powerhouse. Yeah. How did you feel as a 17-year-old debuting for the Australian women's hockey roos team?
Yeah, well, it was amazing, and I still remember the day I was selected and the phone call and hearing that and waiting to tell my dad and my parents when they got home. But it was amazing to debut, and it was a bit of a shock. I think I wasn't actually in the Australian squad at the time. I was selected out of that from outside the squad. I hadn't even represented New South Wales, the Opens women team yet, but they had watched me in some recent under-18 and under-21 sort of national tournaments. And I know that they had sort of spoken to my parents, obviously asking if there was any possibility of what the situation was, if they would support it. Of course, I think they obviously said yes. But it was an amazing feat. I think I was the youngest ever to be selected for them at that time. So, and again, 2 years before that, I was ball girling at the Sydney Olympics and watching these,
ball girls on the field,
heroes of mine. So to go a few years later and to be able to play with some of those was amazing.
And what do you actually remember about the first game? Is it much clearer in your memory?
Oh, look, I think everyone's a bit nervous, aren't you? I think warming up, you're a bit jittery, and it's all that adrenaline and excitement and trying to sort of be calm and get on that field. And obviously at a tournament like the World Cup, you have quite a big crowd as well, which is really exciting to play in front of. That game against England in particular, I remember they had a big sort of Barmy Army following team, a bit like the cricket and things. So they had that there, really doing chants. Thankfully, we won that game. But
that's right and proper.
Yes, that's right. But it was, so I think there's all those aspects coming in, hearing the anthem. So I guess it's emotional, but in a really excited, you just want to get out there and you just want to play. Yeah.
Now, you said you were very young when you made your debut, 17. That's fairly unusual. What sort of things do you think combined to help you reach that level at such a young age?
Yeah. Well, look... The Lord obviously had some kind of plan with that, but I think I'd come through playing, right from sort of 13, 14, I was playing at under 18 age. So I think as a striker, I was given some skills and some speed, and so they kind of combined, and I kept getting selected for things quite a young representative. So that wasn't out of kilter in that sense, but I had great support. In particular, my dad was really my coach, and we spent hours and hours at the local cricket pitch, running up and down on the local turf and at the local hockey fields. And so I had, I guess I had some real goals and some real help with that, in the sense of support to do that. And I guess in like a sporting career, they're often a bit of a roller coaster, but it was just this sort of, I guess, a wave, as you talk about it, that it just kind of kept happening and kept happening, and having some success at a few different tournaments and loving it, loving the whole ride.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you went on to play for your country over 50 times.
Yeah.
And some of our observant viewers may have noticed we now have the hockey dress up there and the
suit.
golden boots gone.
Yeah.
And we've got a medal there. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
That's one that I had from my first European tour in 2003. So the following year, when I was in Year 12, actually, so I missed quite a lot of, about 3 or 4 months of Year 12 travelling. But that was the gold medal we got against, it was a Four Nations tournament, and we played the Dutch the sort of 2 days before, and we lost to them, and then we came back in the final and we beat them in that. And I just remember that one particularly for a wonderful tour, but also playing, representing your country in a country such as Holland, and it's such a huge sport over there. Hockey's huge. It's much more professional even than in Australia and in Europe. And so that was just a really exciting one, and it was just, I guess, one of my first international tours. So I remember it for that. Yeah.
Looking back over your career, what were one or two highlights that stand out for you?
I guess any of those tournaments where you have, exciting final games where you sort of are down and you come back. I do remember getting a hat-trick against China in Melbourne, which was an international tournament that we had here, and so the benefit of that was obviously having family in the crowd that I remember my parents had sort of raced down to watch. And I think it was my 18th birthday, and then I had my first drug test straight after my 18th birthday, which wasn't as fun, but it was sort of a memorable moment. Highlights was definitely also travelling around the world. I saw so much of the world through Europe and America and Canada and Asia and South America, and I think that has something that I realise now what a privilege that was. And as much as a lot of it is hotels and airports and stadiums, you get these chances within there to see amazing things and creation and cities and experience different cultures, and that was really wonderful. Yeah.
Great. I'm still thinking about the fact that I never reached the point where I had my own drug test.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Well, you've made it when you get drug
tested. You've made it when you've had your drug test. Now, I know, Susie, you grew up in a Christian home.
Yes.
Was there any particular point where you made a commitment to Christ?
Well, like you said, grew up with in a Christian home, and I think my parents were, I'm incredibly blessed with the way that they really intentionally and prayerfully raised all their daughters to follow Christ. So I wouldn't pinpoint one particular moment. I think I always knew Jesus and knew that he loved me, but when I was about 14, I was confirmed, and I think at that age as well, you're really starting to make decisions yourself. And so that was for me a point where I took it on for myself and started to really think about what that would mean for me, which then just a few years later it kind of really cemented as I was sort of thrust into a world with a lot of older people quite quickly.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. 17, Christian, playing in a high-powered sporting environment, often away from home. In fact, I think you moved away from home for a while.
Yeah.
How did your Christian faith survive, stand up, or thrive? What sort of things did you find helpful for your Christian faith there?
Yeah, well, like you said, so often either on tour or I think, 2004, when I was 18, 19, I moved to Perth because that was an Olympic year. You had to live where the AIS was, which was in Perth for hockey. So I had to move away on my own in that sense. And I guess I was blessed that I was had sort of Christian family, friends that I could support me in that way over there. But also, I guess growing up, really learning that as much as it's important to be part of Christian communities, the most important thing is our relationship with the Lord. And so for me, that was modeled through Bible reading and prayer, and that was a continual thing that, it was the priority wherever and whatever we did. And so that was something that I guess I really took on in those years, which were often quite lonely as a Christian, primarily on my own as a Christian in those teams or in that sporting world, that I just, by God's grace, kept close to him and grew. And so in a sense, sometimes those periods, as much as they're lonely, I think later on you can really see, wow, that was a
really
strengthening time. Yeah, because I had no one else to fall back on, and he was the one that was always with me, and my relationship with him grew in that sense.
Yeah. How did your parents help you when you were away from home?
Yeah, look, I was often in communication, obviously, with them, but my parents and all my sisters actually would write me letters of spiritual encouragement and sort of hockey encouragement for different tournaments, but they would always leave me as I went off to the airport with some notes in my bag, and they were things that sustained me through. I mean, I remember distinctly my parents giving me a travelling Bible, which was, my most, in writing, it was my most precious travelling companion wherever I was. and it really was, and it saw the world. But but those letters of encouragement really grounded me and kept me coming back to that, and it was also something that I could, having my Bible and my Bible reading notes next to my bed was also even a conversation starter with other fellow teammates who you'd always be rooming with and things, that they would see that, not that you're doing it visibly at all, but they knew that was something that was important to you, even as a younger person. Yeah.
Do you have a letter there?
Oh, well, it was with my medal, actually, one of the letters that, my parents both wrote me, but this one was from my dad, who would always write me a letter before I went off, and partly as I saw him as my coach too, where he would often do different little acrostic poems on striking and my intensity and courage and confidence and skill, but they always came back to full of Bible verses and being honouring the Lord and Him and Him first, and that and committing our ways to the Lord, and so they're actually, I would class them more precious to me than any medals or trophies.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, your family was a big influence on you.
Yeah.
We heard from David a few moments ago about how Jason Stevens was an influence on him with his faith in his sporting world. Were there any other Christian sports people who influenced you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember hearing about Jason Stevens often in the media, and it was always encouraging to hear of other people, particularly at the time that you're going through or around, that are in sporting fields. But for me, I was always really influenced by Eric Liddell. I think growing up watching Chariots of Fire would still send shivers down my spine, and he was an inspiration to me, not just because he was so committed that he stood up to tests that were thrown at him, and he loved the way that the Lord had blessed him with particular skills, and he wanted to serve him with them, and he wanted to give glory for them, and that was give glory to him through them, and that was both by enjoying them and, feeling his pleasure when he ran, but also by knowing that it wasn't his whole will for him, that there were other things he wanted him to do, and being passionate about, serving in China later, but also, just honouring him wherever he was and what he would do. And I think that was, so he was someone I always really admired and still do.
Yeah, I think Chariots of Fire is one of my favourite movies. And for anyone who doesn't know, Eric Liddell won the 400 metres at the Paris 1924 Olympic Games and with an incredible run. Yeah. Now, Susie, I believe you may have a few questions for me.
Oh, yes. Now, speaking of that, you spoke in your book quite a few times about history and Christianity, which I found really fascinating, and the close relationship that they have. So could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, one thing, over the years, sometimes people think that Christianity and sport has something of a hot and cold relationship. But one of the interesting things I discovered was that sport as we know it today really developed in Great Britain, in England, in the 19th century. And the two main groups who really organised and promoted sport were the English public schools, which are like our private schools, and the churches. The churches were really big on sport. And the reason why the churches and the public schools were big on sport is they saw sport as being good for character development, but also the building of community. And with the churches, they also realised it was a good opportunity for outreach as well. And so I just think it's interesting that sport really developed in this strong Christian context, or sport as we know it today. And a lot of the English Premier League football clubs we watch on TV were actually started by churches. So like Manchester City, Tottenham, I think Aston Villa, Everton, all had a church start. And so I think it's good to know that sport and Christianity and churches can really function well together when it's done properly.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love some of the examples you gave in there of where it started. You yourself also played at quite a high level as well, or an elite sportsman. How did you find playing as a Christian in again, a non-Christian sort of environment?
I think it might have been pretty similar to you, Susie. I made a commitment to Christ when I was about 11 or 12, and I was reading my Bible and I was praying. I also went to a really good church which had a great youth group, and I was really convinced that the Christian way was the better way. So I went in the sporting world, and I had some great friends who I really like and still like. I realised that I lived differently to them, but I felt that I was very grateful to live the Christian life. I actually thought I was getting a better deal out of life than what they were. And so that really helped me, I guess, to stand firm as a Christian. And when I was in high school, I'd learnt what I believed as a Christian, but I also learnt why I believed it, a lot of the big apologetics questions. And so I think my faith was pretty solid. I was at a really good church. I got a lot of good support through that. So it helped me to, I guess, try and figure out how I could be a thermostat rather than a thermometer. I'd try and influence my environment. And I remember some interesting conversations. I played a season in England once, and I was sitting in the dressing room with some of the other guys who were all older than me, I think. And it sort of came out a bit like, Jason Stevens. They said, "So, Liggo, you're not going to have sex until you're married." And so I sort of admitted, yes, that was what I was intending to do, expecting to get all sorts of stuff thrown at me. But the guy who asked me sort of went, "Oh," and he almost looked quite wistful, as if that was actually a good
ideal
thing.
Yes, yeah.
And I've always remembered that. It wasn't what I expected. But I think, yes, my personal devotion life, my church, my family fellowship, I think helped me to stand firm and to try and reach out.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's another example of often what we expect responses to be from non-Christians isn't always what you expect. And,
no, I didn't expect that.
And so, it's a good thing you said that. And I guess that's an example of how sport is so interrelated with relationships, and you talk a bit about that in your book as well. So how do you think sport can also function even as a sort of spiritual relationship or a spiritual encouragement?
Yeah, well, I think I had some wonderful opportunities to encourage and be encouraged by other Christians playing sport. I first made our high school cricket team when I was in year 8. I was 13. And I found myself, probably like you, playing with I was playing with guys who had deep voices and shaved. That probably wasn't the case with you. But, I just sit there, all these guys older than me, feeling very nervous, thinking, I hope they don't want me to do anything really stupid, But there was another guy in the school cricket team who was 2 years ahead of me at school, and he went to the same church and was in the same youth group as me. And just having him there, I think he was keeping an eye on me, and it was just great having him there as support. Yeah. I also like playing social sport with my peers. So over the years, there's been one friend, roughly my age, who I've played soccer with in 3 different teams as we've moved around various parts of the city. And it's just great fun on a Saturday going out, kicking a ball around with another Christian bloke, enjoying each other's company, sharing your lives together. It was great fun. Yeah. And then also, I guess, with younger people. I think I mentioned before a young 19-year-old English guy came out to our cricket club who was a Christian. I was, to my knowledge, the only other Christian at the club. And so he came along, he met me, he came along to our church, he joined the Bible study group I was part of. And I think we had a really great time. So there were really great opportunities, I guess, for spiritual encouragement of others through sport.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Perhaps I could just pop 1 or 2 final questions at you, Susie, while we're here. Yeah. I guess something of a sociological question. I mean, the hockey roos were big, 15, 20 years ago. But in the last few years, some other women's sports have actually risen to prominence as well. We've now got the Australian women's football team, the Australian women's cricket team, who are getting very well known. How have you observed women's sport to change, perhaps since you retired?
Well, I was thinking that the 2 key sports I think that have become much more public and popular have definitely been in soccer, and I think that even started in correlation with the men's making the World Cup and things, and then women's soccer really took off, and also cricket, and I think even just them getting much more publicity in the media and being televised. So you're now seeing women's soccer and women's cricket and some other sports as well, but in much more sort of prime time positions, whereas it wasn't always the case, and I guess women's sport hasn't always been as professional. There's definitely not as much money in it, but it's nice to see those models out there for young kids and young girls, to see that it's really a really wonderful, world to get into and to support it. And it's been really exciting watching that. Yeah.
And finally, Susie, we've heard about how your parents and your sisters had a big impact on your faith and your sport. You're now the mother of 2 children.
Yeah.
As you look into the future, what do you want to pass on to them? I'm sure there are many Christian truths you want to pass on to them, but what would you like to pass on to them in terms of their sport, should they play it?
Oh, well, yes. What, do they get a choice? No. I have 2 girls, and as much as they're very little yet, but I guess I think sport, not only is it, it's great fun, and it's a great, you can just get such joy from it, obviously, that I did as well. But I think it's a great way in which you can really grow in your own character. And I think you mentioned that before as well, in just those character traits and being able to walk off the field, whether you've won or whether you've lost, and still see the same. I always remember that Rudyard Kipling If poem that they have above Wimbledon and things. If you can face these same trials and still remain the same and be consistent, that was that's a really wonderful thing. But I guess also the beauty of sport that I would love my girls to get out of it too is that you just meet so many varied, wonderful people from so many different walks of life, that there's not many ways in our world that we can do that in the same way that sport really brings people together, and it unifies them in a way that not many other things do. I mean, people talk about as a whole other language, in a sense, that internationally is spoken, and I think that's true. And I guess I would love them to have the joys out of this, the sporting life, or the good sporting life in particular, but also to be able to use it to God's glory, and being able to walk through life with lots of other people in that way, and meet so many different people, have relationships with them is a really wonderful thing.
Susie Harris, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Well, a big thank you to David and Susie. Firstly, for helping with the book, but secondly, for agreeing to be interviewed. Well, I hope you found our time together to be interesting, encouraging and helpful, and will better equip you to live the good sporting life.